goodness. I got so many things on over here. Hello. Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak, and I'm so grateful when you spend time here on a Thursday afternoon for our deep dive episode. Lots of good stuff we've been discussing lately. Don't forget, if you missed last week, the election integrity with Patrick Colbrick, and I will talk to him again in the future. That was another eye-opening discussion, and there's a lot to absorb. I've done 3 similar conversations with Jovan Pulitzer on election integrity, and I'm telling you, it's like every conversation, there's more to cover in that realm. And we will, again, just after the election, regardless of how that shakes out. Next week, we're going to do a little Halloween. It'll be Thursday, and it'll be Halloween. We're going to do a special ghost hunting edition, kind of like a live remote, not live, but we did a ghost hunt, Tom Carr and myself. And so we'll bring you some footage from that and let you know how that went over at supposed haunted location here in Arlington, Texas. So that is Halloween afternoon, coming up a week from today. Okay. So many of you in the audience, I'm so grateful. You follow me over here from my day job, Pat Gray Unleashed, where I'm the executive producer of that show. And coming up tomorrow, the topic is, this is odd how this worked out. We're going to be talking about weather manipulation. So it's very, there's going to be multiple threads from this conversation that will go over there. Now, that will be a weather conversation. There's so much more involved in today's discussion with my guest, Elana Freeland. She has a book coming out. You can pre-order it now. It's coming out on February 4th. So you gotta wait a little bit, but I want you to hear what she has to say in regards to her book, and I want you to listen to all the ground that is covered by this book. Her book is titled "The Geoengineered Transhuman: The Hidden Technologies of HAARP, Chemtrails, 5G, 6G, Nanotechnology, Synthetic Biology, and the Scientific Effort to Transform Humanity." Now, I'm speaking for myself here. I am just beginning to learn all of this stuff. I'm in the very early stages. And this will probably be the first of multiple discussions that I'll have with Elana. I don't know that we're going to be able to cover a ton of ground here because there is so much in this realm. And I know there's many of you watching right now that are saying, "Welcome to the party, pal." And I got that. Great. I have become more and more suspicious of what is happening in the skies above us. And I don't know. I don't know one way or another what exactly is happening up there, but it does seem like something's going on. And when you take that hunch and you marry it with my complete distrust of our government on all levels, well, I've got questions. And so I've been inviting people on to have discussions to teach me this stuff that I am just now waking up to, and I'll admit. So I'm bringing in my guest right now, Elana Freeland. Thanks so much for making time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so you and I talked last night briefly ahead of this conversation today. And the way I explained it was, you're going to need to kind of introduce me to all of this stuff. And one thing I would like to point out, that you and I scheduled this conversation before there was a Hurricane Helene. And Helene happened, and a lot of people have a lot of questions about that. So while I don't want to necessarily make this conversation strictly about Hurricane Helene or any thoughts that you have about that, how natural it was, if it was completely created out of the blue, if it was just directed, I want to get your thoughts on that. But I just want to make it clear that it's so much larger than any kind of weather manipulation, this whole topic of geoengineering. So I'm going to give you the floor, but I'll probably interrupt you multiple times with questions as they come up, and I encourage the audience to please ask your own questions there in the conversation. And let me just start off with this question, because I think where a lot of people don't even get into the topic of manufactured things around us, I think they get to the question of contrails and chemtrails. I may be wrong on this assessment, but it seems like a lot of people get to that first question, and then you either get them interested or they just completely tune out. And so, can you start us there with something as rudimentary as the discussion and the difference between contrails and chemtrails, Elana Freeland? And by the way, I didn't even give you a chance when I introduced you there. I know you've done a ton of writing on this stuff. So please enlighten us along the way here with some of the stuff that you've been involved with. But by all means, please take it away.
Okay, well, let's start with, yes, the book coming out in February 2025 is my fourth book on geoengineering.
Right.
I've written 3 others, and the first one was Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, 2014. And I want to stress that this is 10 years. I've been in this movement for about 15 years. And that book, I discuss hurricanes, I discuss weather warfare, I discuss everything that you saw in that hurricane that happened to North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, etc. It's an act of war. There's no question in my mind. This is not a matter of silver nitrate in the clouds over that one area. This is a huge weapons system. And to support that, let me start with this quote, which we all should know by now. It ran in The Guardian in London in 2012. And it's by a guy named Matt Anderson. He was the former executive advisor of aerospace and defense for one of the top 10 defense contractors, Booz Allen Hamilton, out of Chicago. This is a guy who knows his stuff. And he made a comment that, in my opinion, has not been allowed in America, but was allowed in England. I don't know why. It's called That War Over Geoengineering. He writes, few in the civil sector fully understand that geoengineering is primarily a military science and has nothing to do with either cooling the planet or lowering carbon emissions. While seemingly fantastical, weather has been weaponized. At least 4 countries, the US, Russia, China, and Israel, possess the technology and organization to regularly alter weather and geologic events for various military and black operations, which are tied to secondary objectives, including demographic, energy, and agricultural resource management. Indeed, warfare now includes the technological ability to induce, enhance, or direct cyclonic events, earthquakes, drought and flooding, including the use of polymerized aerosol viral agents and radioactive particulates carried through global weather systems. Various themes in public debate, including global warming and climate change, have unfortunately been subsumed into much larger military and commercial objectives, and political, we should add, that have nothing to do with broad public environmental concerns. These include the gradual warming of polar regions to facilitate naval navigation and resource extraction. So when Anderson wrote that in 2012 in The Guardian, it never really made it to the United States for several years. And of course, I could do this whole session on the question of the media's role in keeping one of the most important pieces of information from the American public. But let's just move on in order to understand what this classified. It's highly classified. Let's be clear. Technology is capable of, and what we down here on the ground level are subject to from our own atmosphere. So I wanted to be clear about that. And your question is a good idea to go into. I think by the time you would be reading the second book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown, in which I talk about the space fence, which is a term you don't use. Lockheed Martin and I use it. But for you use the term, the way of controlling the ionized atmosphere and the radio frequency and the microwaves and all the rest that travels wirelessly now. And that's your idea of space fence lockdown. We're in a grid now, and we are plugged in, all of us. And it doesn't matter if you have Wi-Fi or not. It doesn't matter if you have 5G or 4G. What matters is there are billions of cell phones operant all day long, 24/7, every day now for years. And we have the ionized atmosphere in which we have electrons popping all around us. So our circulation, just as you could equate that to the planet's atmospheric presence and what that is all about, we have been changed over the last 25 years that this has been running. 25 years of secrecy in broad daylight. Because look at us, we're down here on the ground, and it's like the chemtrails contrail thing. Everything down here, you see the jet trails, and you think of them as contrails. Now, a contrail is a short term for condensation trail, and condensation is generally water, ice, and particulates. Nothing unusual about that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that you're probably accustomed to, we might as well handle that too, because that is almost non-existent anymore, is the idea of weather engineering on a local level by using silver nitrate, dry ice, little tiny planes going up that generally have a contrail because they're using a regular fuel. They're not using a jet fuel. They go up and they go over an area and they lay out the silver nitrate, and now they electrify it from the ground, usually with lasers, and boom, you've got rain.
There's already a lot of layers to this. So let me back up just a little bit, which, by the way, driving home today, knowing that I was going to have this conversation, it was just too ironic that I saw a crisscross in the sky at 2 different altitudes. And it was just like, really? Today of all days, I'm going to see that? And so I was just driving thinking, oh my gosh, what is up there? What is on its way down to me? But you mentioned there, you said it's been happening for the last 25 years. So what specifically started 25 years ago? Because I'm familiar enough with HAARP as a longtime Art Bell listener. So I do at least know about HAARP. So can you explain, because I had to Google this today before we talked, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. It's in Alaska. I mean, I know a congressman is on record as having talked about that. So I assume when you mentioned HAARP there, can you go back to that 25-year mark and tell me what is that connected to HAARP in this discussion?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah.
What does it do? What does HAARP do?
In 1995, a book came out from Nick Begich and Gene Manning in Alaska called Angels Don't Play This HAARP. And it was the acronym HAARP. And Nick and Gene went and did a fabulous job of laying out what was being built right then in 1995 in Gakona, Alaska. Was a huge, and we're talking acreage here, of phased array antennas being set up for some electromagnetic operation. And Nick did the lion's share of research into this and has tons of footnotes in that book. It's still worth reading, because that's the book, and I can tell you like anecdotes, that's the book I was reading when at that time, 1996, I was substitute teaching at a local high school that a lot of military kids go to. And I was reading Nick's and Jean's book. So I, during lunchtime, took the book, was eating my little bowl of noodles, and reading the book. And two of the high school teachers, two males, sat down and said, "Hey, what are you reading?" And I said, "Yeah, this just came out." And I handed it to them. And there was a woman at the table who was one of those introverted, kind of mousy woman with her nose in her sandwich, not wanting to participate in the conversation. I noticed that. And they took a look at it, and I began to tell them the tiny bit that I had read so far and what I was finding out. And this was pretty new to me, even though I had a file on chemtrails already by 95. So the next day, and I'm saying these are connected, the next day I had a military chopper over my house, my property, and it remained between 5 and 10 minutes, very low. They were obviously putting me on some sort of XY coordinate. And I immediately knew it had to do with my having drawn attention to that book. And I assumed that the lady at the table may have been a wife of a military man and mentioned it to him. And so they just kind of collected a little data then. I call the 90s the paranoid 90s, because there were a lot of things happening for researchers like me, who are not particularly PhD minded, not particularly involved in any sort of institutions or foundations or corporations, but simply wanting the truth. And so that was my introduction to HAARP and how serious it was.
What is the purpose of HAARP? What is it supposed to, or at least maybe what is the cover story, and what is your take on what it actually does?
Well, it's not my take. It's reams and reams of evidence. It is a weapon system. It is not at all about helping us. I hope everybody realizes now that when you hear some government agency or institution say that the technology they're using is to help you in your life, that they are probably lying. I hope you realize that by now. But the HAARP was the brainchild of Bernard Eastland, a PhD, and he had built this as a supposedly research project, but that's how they do things now. Is there is, under the human rights clauses of that are attempting to keep people from being used for research projects. There is a clause that indicates that only if you are doing research in a certain manner can that research project qualify to be respectful of human rights. And they made their way around that. And so that's why the HAARP so-called experiment, called a research project, initially is not what it seems. It was very carefully prepared for and connected. There's a good picture of it. And those antennas are not just antennas. I mean, if you think of antenna systems and how they've changed over the years, you realize that the phased array antenna is probably the most weaponized of all forms, and it can be all those individual antennas their rays can be forced into alignment in order to go into a massive beam. And that beam, and this was HAARP's purpose, that beam can shoot all the way up, and that would be, let's do a median of 100 or 150 miles into space, into the ionosphere, which is our protective bubble around the planet, this side of the magnetosphere, which is a little bit higher up and goes up 22,000 kilometers. That the beam can go into the ionosphere, stimulate the production of many, many, many ions, which are basically electrons that have been popped off and activated from atoms, and bring that ray down. If you put it at an angle, like if you're a trigonometry student, you can put that at an angle, and then it will shoot down onto the Earth at another point on the geography, and you can make it into a weapon system. And that's what HAARP is in its most extreme use. Now, it has many, many other uses, and that's the important part, too, for us. That's not that they want to incinerate all of us. That is not the point.
Mm-hmm.
The point is control, and that includes particularly the mind control. And Nick Begich has written a few books now about the mind control aspect of HAARP. And HAARP is not just, don't just think of it as one isolated system. It works in tandem with other ionospheric heaters, that's what it's called, around the Earth. And there have always been some big ones. We used to have one in Puerto Rico. We've taken it down because it sort of fell down. I still don't know the story on that because, as I said, it's classified. But then there's a few in Russia, in Norway, in China. All the northern latitude has the brunt of the number of ionospheric heaters. And sometimes they work in tandem in a system called interferometry. And interferometry is the weapon system. And now we're getting into Tesla. And Nikola Tesla, this is totally a Nikola Tesla type of technology.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought him up because that is always in the back of my mind. Experiment that he did in Siberia. I don't know if that's where you're going with what you're about to say here, but I've always thought of that.
Tunguska was partially. No, it wasn't where I was going, but with Tesla, I wanted to mention that the very first translation of my very first book was done in Serbia, which is Tesla's home nation. I heard from a university professor who said that he very much wanted permission to translate Chemtrails, HAARP, and the full spectrum dominance of planet Earth, because he recognized that I was writing about Tesla technology. And we gave him, the publisher and I gave him permission, and they paid a bit for it. And now it's in Serbian, and now the other books have been translated so far, mainly into Dutch. So it's interesting how I'm known much more in Europe than I am here, because people here don't read; they watch TV. They lower their IQ minute by minute by just receiving pictures from someone else. So anyway, the HAARP was essential for control over the ionosphere, and that was obtained by 2013. And there's a wonderful little video clip from the University of Alaska at Fairbanks, which is what the CIA always makes sure people think owns HAARP now and runs HAARP, which is not really quite true. And there, in that clip, you learn that that HAARP is completely controlled. The Air Force spokesperson says that was the purpose. of
Okay.
the exercises they were running up to that point. And now they claimed to be shutting it down and turning it over to the university. That also was not true. It is still used because it is the most powerful, perhaps barring a new one in China, and I don't have the specs on that. It is the most powerful ionospheric heater that exists.
Okay, so let's go back and kind of clean up a couple of these here that I may have missed here. Um, you mentioned multiple nations have these kind of tools. So are they and you even mentioned at one point sometimes they work together. Um, are they strictly allies that are working together on this, or are there multiple governments who maybe necessarily don't have the same interest, at least on the surface? In other words, are hostile nations doing this as well?
The ones that I studied for the books I've written are NATO members.
Okay.
And you'll find it interesting that one of the clauses in a NATO agreement, I've read about 3 of separate ones, always include the chemtrails, as we call them, the chemical trails, that the nation has to agree to chemical aerosols that are laid by NATO nations. And that's part of the deal. If you're not willing to have that happen to your nation, then you can't join NATO.
So
That's
what
how
are they?
important it is.
What are they spraying then? If they're in the skies above us and they are spraying toxins or what have you, what exactly are they spraying, and why are they spraying these chemicals?
Well, originally, if you go all the way back to World War One and you see some of that film footage of the planes laying chemicals in the trenches in Europe
Hmm.
during the trench warfare, as it's called, uh, you're witnessing the very first World War uh, chemical war,
Hmm.
and that was completely run by. I always like to point this out that there was only one corporation really in Europe that was providing all the chemicals for that First World War, and that was IG Farben. IG Farben came out of World War One wealthier than ever. And then by the time World War II was cooked up, just a few years later, not very long at all, then IG Farben also ran the chemicals for that war. And therefore, it became a very powerful corporation that at the end of World War II divided itself, much like, I'll talk about Monsanto in a moment. But
Hmm.
they divided. IG Farben divided into a series of chemical corporations that we still have today. Bayer is one of them that most people know the name of. There are so many, and of course Pfizer and AstraZeneca and all the rest of the pharmaceutical, as we like to call it, because these are all chemical warfare corporations as well. Once you start going into, say, you're just going to go into HAARP and figure out how it works, or you're going to study chemtrails and contrails, and you start looking at the chemical signatures that are coming out the backs of jets. You see these long trails now that go across the sky.
Hmm.
Sometimes they even film them with their cell phones, just onlookers, and the planes are going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Well, you know that's not a commercial airliner. You know that's not a destination-driven jet. That's a delivery jet, and it's delivering a set of chemicals for a specific purpose. Now, part of it is definitely about keeping the sky ionized. And what that means is you've got the ions coming down from the ionosphere that we now control. You can create ions here by just electromagnetizing everything, which is what basically what Wi-Fi wireless does. And we're now living in a completely Wi-Fi, wireless environment that is constantly zapping all the ions that are in the atmosphere to keep them active and alive, because there are millions and millions, maybe I should use the word trillions, of operations going on daily that require wireless connectivity. And that can be all the way from, the very overvalued idea of fast movie downloads, which is ridiculous as a reason for 5G. That anyone who believes that is obviously not, either it hasn't educated themselves about electromagnetics, which is common, or they're just not thinking anymore, because most people seem to not be able to think very deeply anymore at all, due to this wireless world we live in, which is the space fence lockdown, by the way, the smart grid. So you get this got this activity going on. You've got all these transmissions going on, all the mind control transmissions, the targeting transmissions, all of the things that are not talked about in the press. Meanwhile, what's going on with the American in particular? Why, they're being distracted. They have plenty of They have plenty of what's the word? Entertainment. Plenty of entertainment. Plenty of video games.
Quite easily. Yes.
Plenty of. I mean, the attention span of the American now is just a few seconds. So so we have been taken to the bottom of the barrel without our knowledge, because there's so much that we want to taste and devour and stay in our senses, our senses are being re-diverted from nature and one's own imagination, one's own inner activity, to the newest video and the newest this and the newest that. So you can see how that works, right?
But help someone like me to understand, what is it that is being sprayed from these planes that are?
Oh, I haven't forgotten that. No, I'm getting there. Sorry, I just take my time.
No, you're good. You're good.
I take my time. But at first you were right that the chemicals are primarily to keep the sky ionized. And that would include, they were putting up initially, I would say the main chemicals were definitely aluminum, which is cheap and provides great chaff. That's what the military was spreading.
Pause that for a second, because I hear about chaff all the time and how it's poo-pooed and it's a military exercise. There was a local radar maybe a year ago here in Dallas where that was a strange radar signature that was explained away by chaff. What would be the innocent reasoning behind chaff above above us? What would be a way to explain that away, if not nefarious?
Well, initially it was about what the military said. It was about fooling radar. Okay. They were pursuing a way to have regular kinetic missiles, kinetic weaponry in the sky, where the enemy, so-called enemy, could not perceive it with their instruments. Okay. And that was chaff. But now the purpose of the chaff has been changed, but they're not going to tell you that very often, because they don't particularly want you knowing that they control the ionosphere.
Sure.
They don't particularly want you to know that they are keeping primed their major weapon system, which is the wireless atmosphere. That's the main. That's where the main weaponry is taking place. So, because electromagnetics is the name of the game now, and they like for you to think of the missiles and the old weaponry, which is still used in some small pockets of conventional warfare, just to do some nice camera work and make people feel that that's the measure of warfare, like what's going on now over in Lebanon and the Middle East around the terrible human cost that is being perpetrated there. That idea of warfare is not the real warfare that's going on now. The real warfare goes to these ionospheric heaters that can keep a certain vibratory frequency going in the atmosphere, along with the ions being pumped from the ions being pumped from the ionosphere. This, you see, the entire planet has been weaponized. This is the point. And if you start anywhere in that structure that I'm sort of laying out here in a sporadic way, you start anywhere and you start connecting it to the other things that are coming up, and you do the research on those, you begin to see that the whole thing is operating in toto.
Okay, so perfect. Okay, so it's not limited to the planes are spraying and whatever they're spraying is just that's that. You're saying that those chemicals are connected to things outside of just that sphere.
There are more. There's much more going on. But initially it was aluminum, barium, strontium, chromium, lithium. They were doing a lot of lithium on the west coast of America. Lithium, as you know, is used for mental challenges, and people were being definitely mentally challenged in along that the Oregon coast, as was told by a wonderful researcher named Ann Fillmore. So that never made the press. You never heard it on the 6 o'clock news because they've been doing tons of experiments on us all along since they got the HAARP was up and running in the late 90s. You remember that I said 25 years is how long this geoengineering program that I blow the whistle on has been running. Yes, that goes all the way back to the late 1999 would be the year I would say would be a good year to say that's when it started totally. And that was needed because control over the masses through electromagnetics, we've had electricity since for 100 years now, but we've had to do many experiments in order to make it into the weapon, to weaponize it to the degree that we have now. So now, 25 years into this, they've been adding more and more and more to the chemicals that are piggybacking on the chaff. And the chaff now is nano-sized, right? Nanoparticulates, nanotechnology, nano robots, all of that is now being used to implement more on planet Earth in the atmosphere that we breathe from, the soil that we grow our food in, the water tables that we drink from, the rain coming down that everybody either likes or doesn't like. I mean, everything is loaded with the nanoparticulates and the chemicals for various agendas. And those agendas always have a military stamp on them, but they also have the big pharma stamp on them. And the elites who want a slave class made out of humanity.
All right, so hold on. We're going to slow down right there because I want to go back to something you just said there. First of all, we know that the U.S. government has sprayed over an unknowing public before. So it's I think it's fair to say that the government hasn't become more benevolent as time has gone on. It's not like they've just decided, we're going to stop doing this. So it feels like what is happening now, as opposed to just, we're going to spray and see what happens, whether it's chemicals, whether it's...
no, they know what will happen.
Right, whether it's weaponized ticks, whether it's, we just know that the government just loves doing stuff above our heads.
But it
but it
includes the
sounds like
corporations in that.
right. Okay,
Include,
but that's where I'm getting at. But it
yeah.
sounds like now that that aspect, that activity above us is now being married with, much more, I guess, weaponized, sinister things here that I want you to get into. But in addition to that, if I'm understanding, now it's not only our government working against us, but like you just said, it's an entire industry like big pharma, or it's these global elites. So from my perspective, not I can see the I can see the picture that's being painted, but it's not completely clear to me yet because it's just colors. Can you help fill in the lines here as to how all of this stuff is connected, from what's being sprayed to what's happening down here, and how those are connected, and the government being in bed with these other entities? Can you help put it all together to find out what is their end game with us?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, remember that it's very hard for people to understand that the air they're breathing is loaded, for example, with nanosensors. Now, it is not on my mind that when I go outside or here inside my home, that I am breathing. I know I need my breath. I can't do without my breath. The lungs are exceedingly important in this wireless world now because everything is electrified above and beyond what our bodies were first made for millions of years ago. So I'm now taking in, let's just concentrate on the breath, not the food, not the water. Uh, I am primarily taking in masses. I mean, what am I thinking? A trillion, maybe 2 trillion nanosensors, nano robots that have whose function I really don't know because they're coming down from chemical trails and they're flooding the atmosphere. Maybe there's special ones for the United States of America that are not being done in, say, Russia. They are that there is an unseen uh, world entering my lungs, and therefore my blood, and therefore my brain through the blood brain barrier, because nanotechnology is 1 billionth of a meter. It's 1 billionth of a meter in size. That little teeny weeny nano meter,
Who's
nanometer.
who is creating those nano
Uh,
robots?
well, corporations. They're as we just found out from some of the people studying where the so-called vaccines are from, the
Mhm.
different corporations. We find out that really these are all the government and the military are completely involved in it.
And may I ask, respectfully, as these nano robots that you're describing are coming down, am I saying that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
I know you said they're very tiny. Is anyone capturing them, putting trying to get under a microscope? I mean, have we set eyes on these things?
We have. We
Okay.
have. We have very powerful microscopes now. They're very expensive. I think the common person probably can't afford the microscopes that certainly NASA can,
Mhm.
which has endless tax dollars at its disposal.
And that's another thing I wanted to ask you is, how is this funded? And I know the answer is going to be from your paycheck and mine.
Well,
Um,
more than that. More than that. How about human trafficking? How about
Ooh.
drug trafficking? How about just sheer theft from mortgages? I mean, do I need to go through the terrible list that indicates that America has fallen into criminality? Yes, they do need money, and they have very rich people who are supporting this because you asked where all this is going. Well, one of the places it's going, which I'm certain of, and I've already started building that case in the book that'll be out in February, is transhumanism. You know, when Ray Kurzweil was talking about the singularity and transhumanism years and years ago, he's been at it for 2 or 3 decades. I think people just thought it's just one of those things that the elites are into, that the highbrows in the universities are into. Not so. This is all connected to us. They sell it to us as being enhancement. We're going to be smarter. We're going to be stronger. We're going to have more endurance. Because humanity somehow has failed in being vulnerable and is not all it could be in the strength and fortitude category of say, the gladiator. No, I think we need to wake up and smell the coffee about the fact that it's not going to be so much an enhancement to make us stronger, but it's going to definitely be a control system by which AI can run a slave class.
So, and what you described there sounds eerily similar to what's the guy's name? He's the Klaus Schwab's right-hand man at the WEF.
Oh, you're
Noah.
talking about one of my favorite people who has basically been telling us exactly what they're
Right,
doing to us.
right, right,
Right?
right.
I'm
Noah,
not remembering his name right now.
Noah UV something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
right,
I meant
right.
to look that up before we started talking. But so what you're describing is exactly what the WEF has stated they want. So I guess I'm just personally speaking, I'm just hung up on these nanobots coming down from the sky. And I guess my question to you is, what is the purpose of these things? So let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, those things are absolutely coming down. What are they to do once they get down here on ground level, and who is controlling them, if they're being controlled at all?
Well, I've already told you they're in our blood,
Mm-hmm.
they're in our brains. Can't you put the other thing together? I mean, these are transmission sensitive entities. They are receivers and transmitters. They are programmed, and they have perhaps not all of them are programmed. They go into our bodies, and then they reside in our tissues or wherever in our bodies. We are the host. They are deriving energy from us in order to keep running because they're not organic. They're not alive. They're not, they're made from atoms. I mean, the fact that nanotechnology, the the birth of nanotechnology has happened so silently. You would think they would have been crowing from the rooftops at the discovery of this amazing, cheap to make technology that can build buildings. You can set those nanos through their programming on the task. They have kids' movies that are full of it. You see the nanos going out in a phalanx, like a Roman phalanx, like an army, going out and you see them building this big building. You see them building a rocket ship. You see them building a jet, and this idea that now we have more free time. We don't have to be doing that. We've got the nanotech that can do it. However, when you read about the nanotechnology and you really educate yourself, when you see this, how they build it is by laying one atom next to another, so that most of the nanotech that's out and about is between 1 and 100 nanometers. It's really very tiny, and you probably won't be able to see it under your 300 power microscope. No. But one thing you can see, and I have seen it, was during the California fires. We were able to, if we only knew what we were looking at, which I did, because I study this stuff. When they were deciding which houses would be burned and which wouldn't, you would see in the video feed from the what are they called that fly around and yet are
The drones?
From the drones. You see these phalanxes of what look to be, well, they look like ashes. They're ignited, they're burning, but they're not dissolving. And they're like marching this way, and they're marching that way, and they're marching this. I mean, it's incredible to see. I have that footage, and it was, of course, not shown on CNN or NBC or anything, but you see them going in certain directions. They go to a house. Part of the phalanx goes goes right up the wall, and you see them igniting piles of fire everywhere they go. They're igniting it. But the rest of the phalanx continues on, skips the next house because that's not in their programming, goes to the next house and starts burning it. We were wondering while we were watching this footage how the decisions were being made as to whose houses would burn and whose houses wouldn't. Of course, we tended to think, oh, well, it was just random because it was a wildfire. Well, that was not in the least a wildfire. It was a programmed fire. And that was another use of nanotechnology. The uses are extraordinary, extraordinary. In fact, the military would call it much the same as they call the graphene oxide that is now in our bodies, because thanks to the inoculations, for those who were inoculated, the Holy Grail, because it can be used for so many things. And that is the case of nanotechnology as well, not just graphene oxide.
I would be very
Ironically,
interested.
both of these are in the CV19 serums.
Oh, wow.
Ironically, of course.
So I would be very interested in seeing the footage to help me to better visualize what you're referring to with the fires. That sounds fascinating. And I guess here's a question. If someone is watching this right now and they're thinking, oh no, these nanobots are in my system, they're in my bloodstream. I have two questions. What would be your message to someone watching right now as to what these things are doing inside of them? And is there a way to get them out, or are we just at the mercy of what's happening in our air?
Well, ignorance is not bliss. That's for sure. And as long as we remain ignorant of the technology that is being used and employed on us and against us, I can't really speak to how people's future health looks. Mm-hmm. I certainly know that I have nanobots in me. I know that. I know how to detect them. I'm running a bit of an experiment myself. It's just me. It's not anybody's idea but my own. I now have a feel because I've studied them, and I have a pretty clear mental picture of how they move and how they work. And it could be in a bloodstream. It could be in the dust, the smart dust. They're in the smart dust that's collecting on my computer and that I dust off. If no one has noticed, get a really good neodymium, I think they're called, magnet, and run it over the dust in your house, and you're going to see something magnetic. So now we have a different type of dust. It has nanotech in it, and that would include the nanobots. And then other nanotech things. I don't know what they are, but they can influence because they're programmed and can be programmed remotely from hospitals for precision medicine. We know they're using precision medicine in people for drug deliveries in their bodies. We know that precision medicine is being sold as the best thing since white bread. And yet are we not in doubt anymore about what precision medicine has in mind for us? If we're not, we're as asleep as something inert.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the problem with having been distracted for so many
True.
years. And if something isn't entertaining and requires some study and requires concentration and requires thinking, it just sounds so boring. Why do it?
Sure. Well, what do
That's
you think
our
about
problem.
what do you think about Danny Kaye's question there? She wonders if this affects animals and wildlife as well.
Yes, very much so. Many people are writing me about their dogs and how their dogs are suffering and what should they do, because they have these things coming out of them, right? I mean, the Morgellons, I don't know if people remember that term from the early days of the so-called chemtrails, but there was a bioengineered entity that was in a black filament that was making a lot of people sick, and they were having all the way from sickness like when we think of sickness, we think of uh, regurgitation, we think of fever, we think of sores on the body that have that maybe like kind of like strep or something, have sort of a perimeter like Lyme disease does. And what we discovered was that this was yet another bioengineered entity that was being released by aerosols, because the scientist Clifford Carnicom, who is a good friend of mine, Clifford was finding these. When I joined him in 2005, that was when we started a friendship, and I started looking over his shoulder. He was finding these black filaments, and when he was able to finally break into them, they're not easy. It needed agents and petri dishes, and cutting wouldn't work. But he was able to break into it and discover engineered, uh, bioengineered entities that had different functions. So that's back to 2005. See how long it's been kept under wraps? I mean, isn't that impressive? Isn't that impressive of how you can distract an entire population and just keep those TV stations running, NBC, CBS, ABC, all making lots of money, all being paid off in order to not publish the truth? Isn't it incredible how
So,
long we've allowed this?
and I just asked a moment ago, and I kind of got you off on another tangent there. But if this stuff is circulating inside your body and in your bloodstream, is there a way that you're familiar with that can eradicate them from you?
Well, I'll tell you the things that nanotechnology really likes. Loves electromagnetism. Loves it. Just, electric lights, to be around it, to be near a cell phone on your body 24/7. Uh, uh, the 60 hertz in the walls. The fact that our entire atmosphere is now Wi-Fi and is wireless technology. And we've got the towers. Maybe we live near a tower. We've got antennas everywhere. And now we've got really tiny antennas you're never going to see, and they're everywhere. They've had plenty of time to weaponize our entire environment. So now, how do we go about this? First of all, I'll remind you, I said it's not organic. You can't kill it, but you can starve it, and it will not bother you. It will not have the capability to do, say, what the programming sends it. This is my assumption. I'm not saying this is something I read at all. This is my assumption. If we can starve it out by making our electromagnetic footprint very low, as low as we can get, without being a Luddite, without having our head in the sand about the challenges of our era. I'm not saying run for it. I'm saying let's deal with this. I live pretty. I don't know if this is the reason that I live pretty unbothered, because look what I'm writing. I am being allowed to write this. Let's be very frank. I am being allowed to write these books. I am targeted only once in a great while. Are you familiar with the term targeting?
Well, I mean, it seems like you experienced that back in the late '90s with the helicopter, right?
Well, that was minor.
Mm.
I'm being targeted. I've been targeted several times by electromagnetic weapons, where
And how can you tell this? What's the tip off?
oh, you'll tell. Yeah, you'll be in pain for one thing,
Hmm.
and it will perhaps fling you to the ground. That happened to me. Spun me in the air and jammed me down on a sidewalk so that I dislocated my right shoulder,
Oh.
and I had to go and get it reset.
Oh.
But I was fine otherwise. I mean, I had to be in a sling for several weeks, but it could have been much worse. And there are many deaths going on now.
So how do you think that attack, for lack of it, or being targeted like that, what is the process of pulling that off? Who's at the controls and where are they,
Well,
and what's being directed
that
at you?
particular one, I mean, there are several ways to look at it. You can look at it, I mean, some of the attacks are coming from satellites. As you know, now we have 400,000 satellites up there. Or did you know?
I knew
400,000?
I knew it was a lot. I don't think I would have come up with that number.
Yeah, it's 400,000, but there may be more, not less, more. Some of them are very small. CubeSats are only this big,
Sure.
but they can generate a tremendous force. They can triangulate a force with the cell tower a mile from your apartment or home. Uh, because there are so many nanosensors and nanobots everywhere programmed, and they're in the environment. They're inside our blood. There's this simpatico going on with our environment and what's in our blood. Do you see what I mean? You can set up an electrical field there just by your own field being electrified by electromagnetic devices like Internet of Things. Now we're hearing about the Internet of Bodies. So anyway, that idea, that all started back with this problem that the military was having with how to make the environment weaponized, how to weaponize the environment so that it could be used as a weapon when they wanted. Now, the when they wanted is sort of problematical because you need a lot of money to do these things, and the people with that money and who control that money through banks, etc., have a very different view of the world than maybe the best men in the military, the officers who thought this was going to really help all of us. They may have been misled. So, this is a very big problem, this problem of money and technology and ideation of what people are thinking they want this technology for.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes they don't know what's going to happen. Okay, releasing the nanos. It's just like the electric light bulb back in 1918 with the Spanish flu epidemic that Arthur Furstenberg writes about in his wonderful book, The Invisible Rainbow, where he's talking about the history of electricity in society and how it gave occasion for what looked to be like contagion, but was really the body's reaction to an electrified environment. So, these are complex things. We've up to now left them to the smart people, the experts, the PhDs. And now we find, since the CV-19, I hope we find this to be true, that we can't really trust these people. We can't really trust these institutions. They're supporting things that are inhuman, are dehumanizing, are dangerous for not just non-Americans, but for everybody. So, there's a new wakefulness going on. And that's why
Sure.
I keep talking. I keep talking. I keep talking to
No.
add this one piece that most people don't see, because this is the environment they live in. Why should they spend time on thinking about that? This is their launching point.
So what role uh, does, say, 5G or cell phones and Wi-Fi, because everybody watching this right now, the irony of ironies is that they're watching it through a device, whether it's their cell phone or Wi-Fi or their computer. Um, what what role do those technologies play in all of this that you're describing?
Well, for the nanotech, I've already answered that. It
Okay.
loves that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It grows. It grows. It is self-assembling and self-replicating. It's not alive, but it's self-replicating, and that's the answer. You don't want a lot of these nano robots in you and nanotechnology. Well, you're going to have to realize that you can't have Peter without paying Paul. You're not going to be able to have your health. The American health has never been as bad as it is now.
I
Never.
wanted to ask. I actually had a question for you on that, but you might be on your path to answering
Right.
my question.
And the primary thing is, and I think when Arthur talks about in his wonderful book about the fact that the Spanish flu was not Spanish, first of all. It was actually sort of contrived in the United States at a base, and it was partially due to the body's response to this terrible electricity that it was constantly surrounded by. And in a way, it reminds me very much of the recent inoculation program, so called. Some people would call it biological warfare assault. I certainly can see that aspect of it. But that too, as soon as they decided everything was going to be called CV-19, all symptoms, I don't know if you noticed, but the flu absolutely disappeared. Well, this is the flu.
Uh-huh.
That's what it is. It's the flu. And it's been renamed, and careers have been made on it, and wealth has been tripled and quadrupled because of it, because of the ability to talk people into a pandemic when there is no pandemic. And what is happening is people are being radiated. And when people say, well, yeah, but Elana, they're not being really radiated. I mean, we're just talking about your living environment. Well, non-ionized radiation is radiation, folks. It's not that only ionized radiation is the problem. No, sorry about that. It's the non-ionized radiation as well. It's a price we pay to have electric lights so that we can read at night. But what are we doing instead? We're watching the boob tube and having our IQ lowered. So, I mean, there's goodness that we can gain from this technology, even though our natural body is going to pay a price. It will pay a price. But aging is a price too. I mean, I'm paying a bit of a price. So I try to keep everything in balance in my life so that I don't pay a very big price as I'm aging. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So, someone like a Robert Kennedy would say something like, "Hey, we got to make America healthy again. Look at what they're putting in our foods, the trans fats, and so on and so forth." Um, and ironically, maybe on the same timeline of that being injected, it seems like at the same time that's happening, um, according to what you're describing here, we've had these nanobots inside our bodies. Are you saying that they may be as responsible, more responsible for the unhealthiness of the average American these days than, say, the track that a Robert Kennedy is on?
Well, it's funny you'd mention Bobby Kennedy because a friend of mine who's friends with his family sent him a copy of my last book, which was the one in 2021. And this one's called, very similarly to the one coming out, the Geoengineered Transhumanism. And that's a very fat book. I call it the Bible. This is the everything book, but everything but the kitchen sink book about this problem that we now have. And he sent it to Bobby, but and I was supposed to meet with him in Los Angeles on my book tour, but that didn't happen. That's okay. But I was instead assaulted. Thought that was rather clever. Electromagnetic. My health was just trashed because of that supposed meeting that didn't happen. I'm not blaming Bobby by any means. No. This was something else. But I've tried to get his attention to read about this. But he's a very busy guy. Yeah. And he has a lot of people working for him. And I'm sure that some person opened that book and he never got it. I'm sure of it.
I see.
But I can't determine that. I would love for him to know, and he can turn down 90% of what's in that book, according to his own education. He's a very educated man, but I wanted him to at least know that this exists. I'm not sure he knows, but I am having a little more confidence because of something he said a few weeks ago, which I don't remember now. And hopefully leaders of all people, especially the ones who aren't mind controlled, who aren't run, who haven't been bought off, that they will begin to look at these new sciences coming out, synthetic biology, nanotechnology, and then this problem of the environment having been made wireless. Take a really good look at this and start putting things together. Because I mean, it's funny, isn't it? You've got a technology now, at least this is what I'm saying. We've got a technology that is affecting our biology, our neurology, our all manners of health, our children. I mean, it includes the vaccines. It includes everything's included in this. But if you don't put the pieces together, it just looks like 5 things that are more things to worry about as being separate, but they're not separate.
So let me throw a few more things at you, and you tell me how they're connected, if they're connected. What explain these things to us, because I know in your upcoming book, the Geoengineered Transhuman, coming out on February 4th. I know one of the things you talk about in there is going to be DARPA. So
I always mention DARPA.
Yeah. So explain to someone that may not be familiar with DARPA and what that entails.
Well, DARPA is the agency, defense agency that goes deeply into new technologies and figures out how to weaponize it. Basically, that's it. That's what DARPA does.
Yeah.
And it's not the worst thing, though. I mean, it's something that every military would want to have.
Sure.
Somebody looking over every nitpick and thing to figure out how we could use this to our gain and our advantage. But the worst thing may be, and I was just listening to a video sent out of a few people I admire. It may be CERN. And we haven't mentioned CERN.
No, we haven't. Please do.
CERN is very involved.
CERN.
CERN oversees the magnetosphere and has tremendous capability to collapse the magnetosphere, to collapse it, my friends, and then to resurrect it. And they have done this twice. So this is all a concerted, huge weapon system. And the only new thing I'm bringing in now with the new book that's coming out, and then I'm writing another one on synthetic biology for the same publisher I have now, is making the final connection to the synthetic biology that has been laid to enter our bodies from aerosols and injections. And I will connect those two beyond the shadow of a doubt that they are in cahoots with each other.
Wow. Looking forward to that. Okay.
And that's transhumanism.
Transhumanism.
That's the road
Okay.
to transhumanism.
So you just kind of said something as an aside.
CERN.
Well, no, even more of an aside. You mentioned something there that I have to go back and get you to elaborate on. You said that if I heard you correctly, I believe that you said they've collapsed the atmosphere twice already.
No, the magnetosphere.
Okay, well, okay, sorry, the magnetosphere. What does
That's
that mean?
different.
Help me out. It's over my head. What does that mean?
The magnetosphere is outside the ionosphere. Just picture, here's our planet. Then you have our atmosphere, which is in the troposphere. Then you have the beginnings of the ionosphere. Starts about 20, 25 miles up.
Okay.
You have the ionosphere. And then above that, for quite a while, much bigger, you have the magnetosphere. And the magnetosphere's job is to protect us from the solar extremes and to definitely protect the ionosphere, definitely protect the atmosphere, definitely protect the planet Earth. And when when I first knew about CERN years and years ago, I noticed right away the magnetic nature of it. I mean, that's really huge. And I even then wondered if it had to do with controlling the magnetosphere. Now, as far as going any deeper than CERN's capability of collapsing the magnetosphere, I really haven't spent a lot of time on CERN. But I just received a clip. It's basically a conversation of three professionals. And La Quinta Columna, are you familiar with them? They're out of Spain. La Quinta Columna is an organization that has broken quite a bit of news about the weaponization of these inoculations. And they're very dependable. And being Spanish and not American, where I feel that American graduate schools seem to delight in giving scripts to their graduate students that they should follow for the successful career.
Right.
These Spaniards have really looked at things from a different angle. And that's what I'm for. I'm for, I really believe this is true. I have this phrase up here. I always keep it here. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. We can't. We need another thinking. And what that thinking is, I don't know. I know that my thinking, this is why I have the followers I have, is unusual. Is I'm willing to really think my way through things. Plus, I was raised without television. I'm an ex-60s intellectual. where we all would spend our favorite time not doing drugs, not having sex, not the Time magazine version of the 60s, but we would spend our time talking and reading voluminously and sharing what we were reading to get other people's opinions and discuss them. That was my 60s. And I had some amazing minds to do that with who had not been destroyed by television. So I think we need that kind of thinking. And in this, this three people conversation, they are looking at CERN just the way I looked at CERN when I wrote the chapter 9 in Under an Ionized Sky, and I entitled the chapter "The Temple of CERN." I see it very much as an occult organization that is attempting to push us in a certain direction and is willing to use the magnetosphere to do it, and flooding our bodies with magnetism.
Okay. So I know another topic in your forthcoming book, the Geoengineered Transhuman. You talk about GMO agribusiness.
Yeah.
Can you give us a glimpse as to what kind of ground you cover in that and how it applies to all of this as well?
Right, right. And I think that I think I'll be more direct in this book about that than I have been in the previous three books. Okay, geoengineered food, which is, there are 38 countries in the world that it's a felony if you bring any geoengineered products into the country. It's a felony.
Wow.
You go straight to prison. Because they know the truth about geoengineered food. First of all, it's not food. It looks like food. It tastes like food. They've got some really heavy-duty PhDs working on this so-called food. Because, and I say that with full confidence, because I know that the seed used to grow those foods is synthetic. So what happens when we've had geoengineered food since the 30s.
Yeah.
What happens with geoengineered food when human beings, accustomed to thousands of years of eating from Mother Nature, her animals, her vegetables, her fruits, her fish, what happens when they eat synthetic food? Well, the first thing that happens is their immune system is almost non-existent. It's destroyed. You can't keep an immune system. I mean, it's an amazing, the immune system is an amazing, I don't even know what to call it. It's a presence. It's a presence. And I've been a health nut since the 60s. I was raised on natural food because my mother's parents raised me and they cooked everything from scratch. I never saw a loaf of white bread till I was 9 years old. We ate only what Grandma cooked. We didn't eat out because we were too poor to eat out. And to go to McDonald's or something, there were so few of those in the 50s that it wasn't even an issue. And then, then along came all of these, and the other side of the family were farmers, and they grew everything. And everything was, they made their milk, their cheese, their butter, they slaughtered their animals, they had gardens, big gardens. So I was very fortunate in that way. I built a body that is aging extremely well because of that, and because I have not gone to any Western doctors since I was 13, and I figured out that they're interested in money.
Yeah.
And I have not gone once to those people. I studied Chinese medicine in my 20s, and I use Chinese principles. And I don't mean just herbs and, go to the Chinese doctor and he pulls things from jars. No, I'm talking about yin yang. Yin is acid, yang is alkaline. Using yin yang to figure out what I eat, how much I eat, how I do this. And that when I eat out, now and then for a treat, just to get out of this place where I write everything. Yeah, I'm eating GMOs. I know I am. So the next day, I eat like a saint because I want to redo that in a way. And I try to discipline myself not to go out, not to just go out and have someone wait on me, just to not be able to cook, not have to cook, not have to keep taking care of myself, blah, blah, blah. But that GMO thing, I'm telling you, my friends, you should not be eating GMOs because it's a waste of your immune system.
Okay. Another topic maybe we can touch on here that I think you'll discuss in your book. If I'm mistaken, I apologize. But how about AI? What kind of role does artificial intelligence play in all of this bigger picture going forward with the geoengineered transhuman?
I mean, I think it's doing a really good job with the weather engineering going on, don't you? I mean, all
Tell us about that. Tell us
all they have to do, and remember, a lot of those they're not the kind of AI that we heard about, the machine learning AI that can run themselves and repair themselves and do. They may not be those. They may be another breed of AI that can still take directions from humans who are moving them in different directions for political gain, such as what happened in North Carolina. They wanted the quartz, they wanted the lithium. Then there were all sorts of perks that went with it. It sounds like another one that I'm hearing is that there was there were 55 barrels of nuclear waste that now are polluting an entire river. So if they're going to destroy America, which they are very much, and who are they? I'll just say they're Satanists. That's a very large field. And if you think Satanism just is fun and games at Halloween, you are sadly mistaken. That is a real religion based on death and destruction, and they are extremely active, and they're blackmailing certain leaders with pictures of them with kids. They're doing all kinds of things. There's nothing they won't do to achieve their objectives. As Aleister Crowley said, do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Now with that, there is no law. There is no law to these people. So that AI, I feel, can be redirected. It can be reprogrammed from a distance, etc. And it's it's running the weather according to what are primarily political objectives, but not always. Now, Maui was political objective. And so the fires in California, yeah, they constantly use California as a browbeating instrument, I suppose you'd say, and they test things out there. I mean, you're talking to someone who's been following this stuff almost my entire life. I had to go through the Kennedy assassination, and I had tea with Kennedy in the Rose Garden when I was 16. That has affected my whole life and politicized me beyond belief. I am still fighting, mainly the CIA, but all of the minions that work with and for the CIA as well. So AI is how they want this planet run. Totally. And that would include the humans on it, nature, etc. Yeah.
You've alluded to it here during our discussion and talking about, I guess, is the end game slavery of all of mankind? Is that, and if so, who's the master in that? And what does that look like?
Well, it depends on if you're willing now to cross over from physics to metaphysics, because all of this can't be explained by spreadsheets and logic. There is another player in this. And you could call it, I suppose a simple person would call it Satan. You can call it a force. It's a dark force.
Mm-hmm.
Some may say it comes from somewhere out in space. Some may say it comes from something subnature, would be Rudolf Steiner's idea. And I'm a student of Rudolf Steiner. The idea of subnature and how it's set up, which the Aztecs and Toltecs in Mexico also subscribed to, was that there are 9 levels below us, and there are 9 levels above us, above the earth. And these are all considered to be, by the West, medieval systems to explain things. And it depends on how you want to look at it. But what we have now regarding this assault on humanity, I think it's sort of like, thumbing the nose, the satanic nose at God regarding the special status of the human being, or, one of those old myth stories that you've no doubt heard and discounted as being real because it's not material. Because, we've all fallen prey to materialism to a great degree. And if you can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, it ain't here, baby. And that's unfortunate because there are other senses that we have. But if you watch TV a lot and you eat GMO food, and you get pretty dull. You get pretty damn dull. But if you try to keep yourself pure in a certain sense, that you're awake and alert and your brain cells are still working pretty good, then you might be able to see that this world has layer upon layer upon layer upon layer in it, not after it, not before it, but in it. And that your intelligence, your capability to be an intelligent observer and witness and creator can move from level to level to level to level, just like mine does.
So you kind of have already, I think, with that answer, kind of answered, I think, my next question, which was going to be, what would you suggest? What would you tell people who are trying to avoid as much exposure as possible to this kind of barrage
Of technology? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, knowledge is, as I write in my book to people and when I sign my books, knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
It's power for the dark side, and it's power for the light side.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't do knowledge, but you do fast movie downloads and, stuff your face and call it good, you're probably not going to be involved in the solution, because the solution has to do with purifying your life in a sense where you're highly awake, as you can stay,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can see things for what they are. And it's not a mystery, and it's not a matter of finding an expert. It's that you see it because you are educating yourself constantly. You came to the earth not to just be a couch potato and a sort of passive observer, but you came to be an active participant in one of the greatest wars we have ever had, which is the war between light and dark, the war between good and evil. It is going on hot and heavy right now. I can't believe I've been so fortunate to be here for it. And I couldn't have asked for more because I'm a warrior all the way through, and I fight for humanity, for our evolution as wonderful beings, not the criminals, not the people who have lost their humanity and have been taken up by other entities, but a real human being, the real human being.
So that might be a good place to hit pause on our discussion for now. I mean, we have covered much more ground than I thought we would today. I'll say that, Elana. I
Yeah,
mean, if you missed any of this conversation, I mean, we've talked about CERN, AI, GMOs, HAARP, DARPA, Big Pharma, chemtrails. It goes on, and that was just about 90 minutes or so. So, but let's do this. Let's end it right there. But I'm sure there will be plenty for us to discuss in the future, especially once your book comes out in February. The Geoengineered Transhuman: The Hidden Technologies of HAARP, Chemtrails, 5G, 6G, Nanotechnology, Synthetic Biology, and the Scientific Effort to Transform Humanity. I mean, it's been a fascinating discussion. I'll tell you that, Ilana, and I
yeah,
appreciate your time.
yeah.
But let's definitely stay in touch because, like I said, I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this, and I look forward to future conversations. So I want to thank you for being a part of this today, and thank the audience as well. Whew, there's a lot there, and I appreciate you sharing your time with us today, Alana. Thank you so much for
All
your time.
right, thank you.
Thank you. You have a good day. I'll see y'all tomorrow on the Friday Live.